Welcome, IT changemakers, to the DEX Show with Tim Flower and Tom McGraw. Let's get into it.
Hello, changemakers. Welcome back to Reality Bytes. It's the first Reality Bytes of the year. The panel are still joining us, everybody, so I can't say for sure who's going to be with us today, but we have got Sean, Oriana, and Tim already in the building, and it's lovely to see you all. Today we're going to be diving into the complex intersection of productivity, employee experience, and digital tools, and how they are together shifting both surface level metrics to actually enhance the way we work. How can digital employee experience be the key to driving genuine collaboration, productivity, and employee well-being, as against to simply helping the man upstairs extract more blood from the stone? And I won't tell them where I got that phrase, Tim, but I think we did want to start by being clear about our definitions. What are we talking about when we think about DEX as a productivity enabler, and what aren't we talking about?
Yeah, so in my conversations with folks, and it's kind of, I would say it's around the world, there's a misperception in some cases that DEX is a productivity tool, and I think it's worth spending a little time separating the talking about the line between employee productivity and availability versus enabling productivity uh, uh, and not creating it or even monitoring for it. So let me tell you what I mean. It's the let me put it this way: the promise of DEX is that it brings that opportunity to be productive by removing interruptions, by enabling employees with better adoption and engagement channels, and monitoring and removing that lost productivity, the disruptions and the like. Um, it's not the monitor of the actual productivity. We monitor and remove the failed productivity, but it's not creating productivity. And I don't, and the reason I wanted to go down that path is we really need to avoid becoming the corporate time clock, right? We're not, we're giving people the ability to be productive and removing the hurdles to being productive. And I think we've done a good job highlighting those benefits to the IT teams. We've done a good job highlighting the benefit to the business. I think we need to focus some efforts, and maybe this is partly the job and the role of the internal DEX team too, is to highlight the benefits to the individual. Better job satisfaction, higher level of accomplishments, better performance, less frustration, more opportunity to learn. I really think there's a missing part of our communication and what we do and what DEX is and the value that it brings to the employee versus, like you said, just trying to get more productivity from the stone. And you can even tie it to things like return to office. I think there's misperceptions that remote work is not is a hurdle in and of itself to productivity. And I think DEX can not only demonstrate that that's not reality, and if there are hurdles to productivity, DEX gives you the opportunity to find them and remove them. So a little bit of a brain dump there, Tom, but I think that there's a value in having that conversation about the difference between creating versus solving.
There absolutely is. Let me ask you, Tim, what about the dynamic in your view between employee engagement and productivity, right? I feel like this illuminates the topic because we know that a happy employee is a productive employee. And we know that from our own experiences day in, day out, right? It's not something you need statistics to validate, but they do. And is it that distinction between enabling employees to be happier at work through making sure they can be optimally productive within their own terms and understanding, as against monitoring, measuring for the organization itself? Is that a good way of kind of approaching that distinction in your view?
I think so. Even if you look at the last 2, 3, 4 weeks, it's a unique time in the year for employees, and I suffered from this as well. You start to feel a little bit like a hermit working from home, right?
Yep.
There are plenty of times at home where productivity is flowing, and I feel creative, and I've got time to focus. But then over an elongated period of time where you're not connected, where you're not collaborating with others, where you're not engaged, you start to feel that disconnect from your peers, from your company. I think there's a value in leveraging not only DEX but the collaboration platforms that we help to improve to maintain that connection with employees that are remote. Um, I don't know if that answers your question about the difference between employee productivity and corporate productivity, but just the 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 perceived hurdles about being remote sometimes are real, and I think there's ways to solve for that.
Fascinating. Dina has joined us, thankfully, because I wanted to ask her about the sort of whole issue here of KPIs. The green watermelon cliche, Dina. Is there a kind of new dimension to the old watermelon analogy when we think about how DEX can perhaps translate into reflecting deeper sense of workplace health and engagement as against sort of simple sort of technical metrics?
Yes, totally. So it's the with the watermelon effect. If we're starting from there, it's not just the hard metrics that we're trying to measure, right? To measure the full workplace experience, we need to have the sentiment. The sentiment aspect is huge. So going back to the topic we started the episode with is if we keep everybody going to offices and like force them to go to offices every day, etc., it doesn't mean that it's going to, and it will enhance collaboration. Doesn't mean it will enhance productivity. This is why we need to keep an eye on both of the metrics, the sentiment aspect and actually the measure of collaboration and productivity, because it's great to be in the office. However, you're losing a lot of time transporting back and forth, etc., which is good. But if, like Tim was mentioning earlier, if you're only working away from the office, away from your colleagues, etc., the collaboration point, which is the human point now that we're encouraging more and more every day, and we want to keep on using AIs, etc., which is again great, but you still have the human touch that you need to keep, the collaboration aspect. So I think we are stuck a bit in the middle between both to have that sweet silver lining of going to the office, but then also working in your own, on your own pace, in your own independent environment, etc. But it's the mix of both. So the questions comes in place is, do we want to force going back to the office? Do we want to keep away from that? I think the answer to it is a mix of both, because that's where most of the organizations have seen productivity increase, when you're having the freedom to mix between the hybrid workspace, let's say.
What's your experience, Dina? You travel quite a lot. You travel offices and workplaces over the
Yes,
course of the
yes. So
podcast
even
quite a bit.
even even before COVID, so I've been a consultant a long time before COVID, and I have been doing that remote hybrid work aspect before. But and it's not for everybody, because you need to be a little bit committed into delivering what you need to be delivering. You need to be on a timely manner, whether you're mixing up time zones, and that's one of the things I have been doing, working different time zones, different locations, different customers, etc. So you need to have a very good time management. You need to have a good productivity measure. So you would understand how much is too much, how much is the collaboration that you would need to be doing, a necessity kind of collaboration. So I personally prefer both the hybrid aspect of things, because I enjoy being at the office, collaborating with people, and you really get a lot of things done. And it's like opening an ideas Pandora's box, right? And also working on a focus mode in on my own screens and everything, just to get the things that I need to get done. So it's the mix of both. I think the more we practice, the better we get at it. And making sure that you always keep the productivity measures or metrics up front.
I completely agree. Sean, we were sort of splitting hairs about this notion of kind of corporate and employee productivity earlier. You had a different terminology for it. You talked about the distinction between productivity and efficiency. And when we think about that specifically, how is it that DEX tools and AI can optimize and streamline communication, collaboration, etc., and make the difference in these areas, or illuminate that category distinction?
Yeah, I think one distinction I wanted to make was between productivity and efficiency. Productivity, just to bring it back to basic terms, is more about kind of ticking off boxes in the day and doing as much as you possibly can. Whereas I think efficiency is doing it in the shortest amount of time frame, or improving a process to get to an answer, which isn't exactly the same thing. And I think this actually is sort of related to what Tim said earlier about like creating versus solving. I think AI and DEX tools can help with both of those spheres, get you closer. But I do feel like sometimes, you can solve as many problems as you want in the day, and that's good. But for the bigger strategic work or creating something from nothing, for example, in marketing, I'll give you a clear example, it takes a little bit longer to get to that solution. I don't think AI is there yet. Sometimes you need to, this is a very long answer, but I've said this to a lot of you. There's this thing called the intelligent unconscious, where when you're like thinking about a problem, you just can't find an answer. So you got to walk away, you go for a walk, you exercise. And then the next day, randomly, an idea pops in your head. And you're like, I think that's the thing that's going to help me solve this. And I think that is important even in the corporate world. Even if you're like trying to write a song, or, that's where it kind of translates to. But in the corporate world, you have to be very creative, solving problems. And sometimes you got to let those problems sit with you for a permissible amount of time before you can really come back with a smart, unique approach.
Absolutely. Oriana, let's pick up on that theme, and on a theme that you've spoken about before, which is, organizations now preparing themselves in very real terms for the fuller integration of AI. On the ground, what does that look like? Where are we at? And what are you seeing in the customers you're speaking to on that front?
Yeah, I think there's sort of maybe a few different basic elements to that, right? One of which is touching on what Sean was talking about with the creative elements of work, and this thing that I'm hearing a lot of people say, right? I want AI to help me do the laundry so I can make art, not have the AI make art so that I have to do the laundry all the time.
Cool.
And
Nice.
I think we can really apply that metaphor to how do we think about that in terms of the actual work that we're doing, right? So in our context, especially in things like IT, there's the boring but important stuff that needs to get done, and that's often extremely tedious, the metaphorical laundry of our work. And that's where I think we can really make a huge impact in terms of improving the quality of life of work itself. And making people's work easier. And the initial, I think, energy around AI was very sensationalistic in a lot of ways. It was very driven by hype. And now I think we're starting to see a lot more like, okay, well, let's get pragmatic about this, right? Where can we actually have the most impact by integrating with work processes? And this is super important because in talking to our customers specifically, and also people in tech in general, it's often very hard to make change, right? There's been so much change in the last few years. We've talked about this a lot in terms of what it looks like in the digital landscape. And so what people want is not shiny and new and flashy all the time. What people want is smoother, more efficient. It works. I don't have to learn something completely new every 3 to 6 months, but rather I can integrate this into my existing work process, and it is removing some of the tedium. It's automation and orchestration. It's all of these things that can have a very powerful cumulative impact.
Mm.
And I think that's sort of the core of what I'm seeing people move towards is really making this stuff real and concrete in ways that are potentially a lot smaller in the specific implementation, but a lot more tailored to the context.
Bringing it back a bit to that productivity efficiency distinction, right?
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I think about when I hear all of the stuff that Tim and Dina were talking about with productivity, efficiency, things like that is we keep mentioning measures, right? And as a researcher, I think a lot about how do we develop good metrics and things like that. And one of the pitfalls that I think people can be a little bit reluctant to talk about at times is the fact that if you set a metric as a goal, it's no longer a good metric. And this is really tough, right? Because, we want to have good metrics and we want to succeed. So it's very easy to fall into this pitfall of you set a specific way of measuring something because you want to see, are your policies and processes working effectively? But once you have that measure in place, there's a very, very powerful incentive to work towards the measure rather than work towards the thing that is actually going to improve things, right? And this is where you get, for example, cultures of looking busy in the office.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what we want from return to work, right? We don't want people to be going in and trying to figure out, okay, how do I get there 5 minutes before my boss and leave 5 minutes after my boss because I need to create the appearance of looking busy. We want people to be going there and saying, okay, how do I really get value from collaboration, like Dina was saying, if that's why you're coming in, right? Or how do I make sure that I'm cultivating an environment where people can collaborate across multiple time zones and multiple offices? And I think that's one of those things where um, you really run the risk of having those watermelon metrics. You really run the risk of um, having constantly shifting metrics because you realize that they stop measuring what you need them to measure because people are just trying to measure or work to the metric rather than work to the end outcome.
Can you measure the outcome at all then? Are there deeper metrics which elude this kind of paradox, or is it a question of having a completely different mentality? I'm not quite sure which one you're pointing towards.
I think it depends a little bit on the context. Probably a little bit of both, right? Some of it is, are you setting metrics that do work effectively, right? Like, for example, sales numbers. Obviously people want to work towards those. It's great. Um,
Yeah.
but then there's other things, right? Like, what are the things that you risk missing if you only look at those? And that's why we need to have a lot of different metrics, right? So when we talk about productivity, this is one of the reasons why we champion DEX, right? So are people actually being efficient, or are they expending a lot of effort on looking efficient, right? And so that's where we can see, for example, if people are like Tim was saying at the beginning, are we actually removing the barriers that people experience to coming into the office, to working effectively from home? And are they happy with that outcome? Is that actually making them more loyal, if that's what you want from your employees? Is it making them more effective as workers? Or is it really promoting um, things that create the appearance of that superficially without driving stuff that's actually making your company more productive and workers stay and be happy and be effective in the long term?
Dina, first of all, Dina, since you raised the kind of KPI issue initially, anything you want to riff on following Oriana's thoughts there?
Yes, I think it's people addressing people at the end of the day, right? So we need to be keeping that in mind. We have measures for the businesses and KPIs and all of that, but we need to be adaptive and dynamic, making sure that we are employee first, right? This is where this is the most valuable asset of any organization. It's employees. So we need to make sure that we have this sweet balance between making them so comfortable, effective, efficient, productive, and also getting the results that we're trying to get from the business aspect. So it's the sweet balance of both, where I think it becomes challenging to try and measure it. Just going back to your question earlier, is there a specific metric? Is it a hard metric that we need to put in place? It is, but it is dynamic as well. We need to take all of the changes into the equation just to come up with a good output. A little bit hard to accommodate that when it comes to people. It's easier when we're doing it with processes or technologies, but we need to be as dynamic and as agile as people are.
I love it. And Tim, I think Sean brought in that interesting distinction of efficiency and productivity, and then Oriana spoke about the kind of difference between rote work, which can perhaps be more efficiently automated, with creative work, which needs to be kind of protected in some sense. I mean, anything there that left you with any final thoughts for the discussion?
Yeah, there's a bunch on, and I agree wholeheartedly with Sean around the need to take the right amount of time to apply creativity to solutioning and problem solving. I think the one though that I would really want to wrap up on with is, and maybe it's in the form of advice. Don't manage just by the numbers. The numbers are a data point, but they're only one data point. If you get lost in the data, you're going to lose, I think maybe putting it extremely, you're going to lose your humanity. You've got to connect with people. You've got to understand the reason and rationale behind the numbers. So the other maybe controversial thing, or maybe something that needs to be done with care, is the numbers need to tell you what the outputs are, what the outcomes are, and some I think it was Dina made the point. Some of that data drives, or maybe it was Oriana, drives the wrong behavior. Yeah, it was Oriana, where you just striving to meet the data point versus driving the right behavior. So I would argue that when you see that, you maybe almost need to make the measurement of those metrics not known to the process or the teams that are providing the output, right? If you're driving the wrong behavior, measure the output, but then engage with those employees about behavior, about process. I think and maybe that's the wrong way to approach it, but there's got to be some way to protect the sanctity of the data without it being manipulated.
But like Schrodinger's cat or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's wonderful stuff, everybody, and it's lovely to see you all again for our first Reality Bites of 2025. Do as ever check for show notes where you can find free downloadable reports from the likes of Forrester, Gartner, and our own research team. And if I have this correct, Tim, I think we've just ordered everyone back to the water cooler.
I'm in the water cooler today, and it's actually nice to hear the office buzz and connect with people. So I'm a fan of getting into the office once in a while. I'm not a fan of the mandate. So.
Love it. Okay, thanks so much, everybody.
Goodbye.
To make sure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure to leave a rating of the show. Just tap the number of stars you think the podcast deserves. If you'd like to learn more about how NextThink can help you improve your digital employee experience, head over to nextthink.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.